Oulton Park is the scene for British GT action this Bank Holiday Monday. We are live and we're getting ready for the second one-hour race for a mouth-watering grid of supercars. We had an all-action first race won by John Minshaw and Phil Keane. We've had some great support race action as well, and there's more drama from the mini challenge coming up to look forward to a little bit later on. But shortly, the pit lane is going to open and the cars for the British GT Championship will make their way out on track. David Addison and Martin Haven here at Oulton Park. It's a great circuit. The bank holiday weather has been a bit fickle though, Martin, but that in turn has given us some very dramatic action all morning.
It certainly has, and the track has now become a little drier, although the Formula 3 race that was just finishing was interrupted by incidents because they had a sprinkler of rain as well. Hasn't stopped a hardy few souls barbecuing. Everybody else is about 6 layers deep in winter clothing that they hastily dragged out from the loft because they'd forgotten to spot when it was summer last weekend that there was a bank holiday coming and winter would return. Well, this is the first of 8 live races this season. You'll be able to see all of them on Front Runner. Let's take a look at the action from earlier on today. Well, it all started very badly for the number 24 Aston Martin. It blew a hose on the grid, adding to the liquid that was already down after the skies had opened overnight. Matt Nicol-Jones's 62 Aston Martin had a contact on the first lap with a rival, and that wasn't the only contact. They would later be excluded from the top 5 for that first incident. The only one significant off was the Limo Mercedes, which went into the barriers but did rejoin. Battles throughout the GT4 field were thick and furious, but through it all, through the rain, against all his rivals, came the number 33 Lamborghini. And John Minshaw doing a sterling job at the start to lead by the better part of 20 seconds. GT4 leaders saw their hopes of victory disappear in the pit stops. And as the Ferrari of Matt Griffin carved its way into a 4th place finish, a penalty and then final exclusion from number 62 Aston Martin dropped it out of GT4 contention. But victory for Barwell Automotive, and indeed it was a Lamborghini 1-2, with Bentley just being pipped at the line for 3rd position by the Ferrari. Well, you can see the skies overhead, David. You're the local here. I mean, it's grey, not quite so grey, and a bit more grey than that.
Which means it's a lovely summer's day here in Cheshire. No,
I've got the factor 50.
Yeah, the sun has tried to break through, and there's more promised, but yeah, it is, I'm afraid, chilly. There's not really much wind to help to drive the circuit, and it is not as promising weather-wise as it was earlier. And the circuit is still greasy, and even though support races are running and in theory trying to dry the track, because people are going off the road, they're bringing the mud back on. Hence, you've got the track sweeping going on down there at Britain's. But
bit of mud, bit of debris, bit of wing, bit of bodywork.
We can go with that.
All that sort of stuff.
But the GT contingent will be back out on track very shortly. You're right about hardy fans here.
Fancy a brew? Yes, please. A cup of tea wouldn't go amiss at all. Mind you, we've just had locally sourced ice cream. For Source Reed stolen, which we purloined on the way back up to the booth. So we are ready with a full grid of 28 cars. Now, the Team Parker Racing Bentley started on pole in race 1 and does so again. Alex Legui is with Rick Parfitt Jr.
Yes, a quick chat to Mr. Parfitt Jr. himself. Team Parker were pulled for race 1. You had a bit of a tricky start, didn't you? Talk us through what happened.
Well, I mean, we all know that Bentley has strengths and it has weaknesses, and the weaknesses are it's not brilliant in the wet. We have basically a bit of a traction deficit to the Lambos and the Astons, and to be honest, we thought we would be lower than that. And also, add to that, I'd never actually driven the car in the wet with a wet setup before, so to say I was nervous is a massive understatement. But as always, I just literally on the outlap tried to find the limits and just tried to get used to it, and it felt actually not too bad. And then off the start, you saw the traction. I mean, straight away, John just absolutely left me for dead. And I mean, you could see the Lambos were in their own race in a certain way. And then it was just down to me. I knew that I had to push as hard as I could without taking too many risks. And so my job was to bring a car back to Seb. It's a long championship. Our golden rule this year is to score points at every round, and so it was a measured drive from me to try and maintain the gap. We lost a bit of time in the pit stop, which allowed the others to go out, and Seb on cold tyres unfortunately lost a couple of spaces, but like I said, we knew what our limitations were, and we actually said before, if we came away with fourth, that would set us up really well for this race, because of course now we've got no penalties. It's drying out, so we're going to play to our car's strength. We've got a 15-second technically advantage over 15-second, and then a 10-second, so we've got advantage over the Lamborghinis, which should play into our hands, and so now is the best chance of actually securing a result.
And Seb had a great result here last year, fastest lap, fastest, great in qualifying, and the win in the second race. I guess the feeling, like you say, your aim wasn't necessarily to win this weekend, but does it feel hopeful?
Well, I mean, if it was dry, I absolutely was to win, to be honest with you, because as you saw, it is drying, and I think there's a dry line now, so I think we'll be in good stead. But both of us in qualifying broke the respective lap records. I broke the AM lap record, and Seb broke the pro lap record. So we know the car's good, and so now obviously with the drying track, we've got to hopefully do what we do best. But you've got Phil Keane, one of the best drivers in the world. You've got Sam Tordoff. You've got the drivers in this series are phenomenal, let's be honest. And the AMs aren't even true AMs, to be honest, except for me, obviously, because I'm a fantastically amateur at all moments. So yeah, it's that. But I trust this boy very well. He is an immensely quick driver, and I think he's one of the most the quickest unrecognised talents in the country at the moment. You can't argue with 5 poles last year, and he's done it again now, and he's truly world class. So let's hope that we can bring the Bentley back in front.
Fingers crossed for dry weather.
So Rick Parfitt will do the second stint, and Seb Morris, the man that you just seen getting on board, who, with those 5 pole positions last year, and like Rick Parfitt, took pole in his session. The AMs have their own qualifying session for race 1, and the pros have their separate standalone qualifying period to determine this grid, the race 2 grid. The nice thing about the first race was that, although we had one car off into the tyres, it was able to rejoin, and perhaps atypically for Oulton Park, where quite often it's a little bit bruising, everybody managed to get through without too many dramas and are good to go in this race. We did lose 2 Ginettas with damage in free practice early on Saturday, but out of the first race, the entry is complete and we are good to go. There's John Minshaw, race 1 winner, local man, and his father Alan Minshaw we saw cheering him on, now recovered after a heart attack he had here last year. He was here to cheer him to victory in the first race, and the fans get themselves ready as the cars very shortly are going to be released. It's the full international circuit here at Oulton Park, this Easter meeting that has always been a centrepiece of Oulton's calendar. For a long time it was always a Good Friday meeting, but then a few years ago, under Motorsport Vision's ownership of Oulton Park, the format changed to make Formula 3 and GT the main event over Easter weekend, and because of local bylaws, on a Sunday you can only start engines and start racing at 12 o'clock, so there wasn't really much time to cram everything in. So instead it's all day Saturday and all day Monday, and it means that there's bags of action for the fans, and it's one of the major meetings here at Oulton Park, which was a Formula 1 venue for non-championship Formula 1 races like the Gold Cup, going back to the 60s and the 70s, and even hosted British Formula 1 up to the early 1980s. But it is still a great circuit. It's one that the drivers love. It's perhaps a little narrow these days for modern GT cars, but that didn't suggest that we were having anything other than a very lively race first time around, and it gave us lots of drama. And of course, around here, Martin, you see who the good drivers are.
Well, you absolutely do. I mean, this is a very challenging driver's circuit. It's a proper old school track, a real parkland circuit, uphill, down dale. Almost every exit comes into a blind straight over a brow or into a crest. There's not a level corner in the place. And so it is really tricky, even in bone dry, hot and sunny conditions. Well, let's hear from our race 1 winner, John Minshaw's with Alex Le Guy.
A lovely opening race here at Oulton Park for Barwell. John, well done. So Phil is out behind the wheel. Thoughts from the team?
Well, I was rather hoping to be wet again, but it doesn't look like it's a drying track, so it looks like everybody's going out on slicks. So, I think it's a Bentley race, this one. They've got no penalty, pit stop penalty, so I'd be surprised if the Bentley isn't first. But anyway, we'll see what we can do.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the pit stop penalty?
Well, it's a success penalty. Because we won the first race, we have 10 seconds extra in our pit stop. Second has 7 and third has 5, so we're at a bit of a disadvantage.
And this is something that will obviously come into play an awful lot over the year.
Well, it'll even itself out, and you know, I'd rather have it here than have it at Rockingham the next race.
Yeah, great stuff. Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Well, that's a very valid point, isn't it? We saw 3 cars in the GT4 category penalised because there is a set minimum time for safety reasons below which you cannot, or faster than which you cannot carry out your pit stop. 100 seconds for a GT3 car and 100 seconds for a GT4 car, 65 for a GT3. So it's 1 minute and 5 seconds, and for the number 33 car, it's going to have to be 1 minute and 15 seconds. So you really have to be very, very careful about this. If you're even a tenth of a second too short, then you will have to come in and serve a penalty, and that's going to really hurt you out on the racetrack.
But err on the side of caution and waste a second. That could be the difference between another place on the track and losing a race. So the pressure does go onto the guys with the stopwatch.
Well, you know, these races, hour-long race, 2-hour-long, 3-hour-long races, the format in this, it is endurance racing, it is a team event, so you've got a 2-driver lineup in the car, there's a mandatory driver change, or a number of mandatory driver changes in the race, so there's that team element. But yes, the pit stops, the timing of the pit stops and getting the work done, deciding when to do them, what to do, it's a very, very team-driven sport, unlike single-seater racing. So this is, you know, it's the top flight national sports car championship, but it is very much the jumping off point into international categories of racing, and that's, you know, that's the ambition for a lot of these teams on the grid, is to learn about it in British GT and then to venture out into the Pompan series and eventually, hopefully, to end up racing, you know, at Le Mans.
And just to finish the point about pit stops, it's not just the stationary time, it's drive in to drive out and the stationary bit to do the driver change. Number 62 you are riding with, heading round towards the grid, and this is the car that is going to be started by Matt Nicol-Jones for the purposes of this race. He will do the first stint of that car having been excluded from race 1. It suffered damage, it had pretty much everything thrown at it. Damage, stop go, then an exclusion. Things can only get better.
Well, he's starting 28th. He will be hoping that something comes into the mix. And we haven't so far had to call on our safety car driver today, and hopefully that will remain very much the case. There is your pole sitter, the number 31 Team Parker Rentley Racing Bentley. I've got to get these teeth sorted out. Seb Morris, the Welshman, is on board, and his teammate Rick Parfitt Jr. will take over somewhere between 25 and 35 minutes into the race, or 34 minutes, 59.999 seconds. Like I said, every thousandth counts. Now here's the car that was leading the GT4 class. It's a McLaren run by the Black Bull Racing team, and that came in with the lead in GT4, and then they couldn't get the left rear wheel sorted, couldn't get it locked on properly, and that lost its lead in the class, and in fact dropped down to become the last classified finisher. That car, Sandy Mitchell and Kieran Haggerty last year, very much a front runner in the GT4 class. And for those of you that are new to the category, the cars essentially look pretty much the same. You can have a McLaren or an Aston Martin in GT3 and in GT4. The difference is the GT3 cars tend to be more powerful, more aerodynamics, and more advanced. Well, let's get down to the front of the grid. Alex Le Gui is with Sam Tordoff.
Well, for anybody who was asking the question of whether Sam had made a good move to move over from British Touring Car, the answer I would say is a resounding yes. That was a great opening race for you. Tell us about the switch.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, I've been really excited to get started this weekend. You know, British GT was a new thing for me. Driving GT3 cars a big step up, and certainly did make it easy in race 1, being in the wet. That was my, you know, I've done very little running in the wet, so I was a bit apprehensive how it would go. The Lamborghini was fantastic, so really happy to kick off this championship like that. Now we have slicks on a damp track for race 2, so nobody's giving me an easy time this weekend on my debut. So it should be interesting. I think the car is good again. Yeah. We just need to keep off those wet patches.
So sitting here, you're in a pretty good position. What is your strategy going into that first corner?
Well, first and foremost, a rolling start will be a completely new thing for me. I've never done one of them before, so this is going to be a new challenge. Phil Keane will be quick, especially in these damp conditions. I expect him to get in front. And then perhaps the Bentley might struggle again in these wet conditions, so I think I need to get past the Bentley as quick as possible and try and hang on to Phil.
Good stuff. Well, fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Yeah, if he thought his introduction was tough, wet weather, but with wet weather tyres, then all of a sudden, of course, now we've got potentially wet weather, but with dry weather tyres. So actually, it's just got tougher. And he's on the second row of the grid, third place on the grid. Of course, you know, racing in the British Touring Car Championship, he's used to having a lot of fast-moving machinery around him, in him, and whatever over at top of him. But again, it's a car he's not used to. And
Indeed. Yeah.
Makes life a little bit more difficult.
But he's very adaptable though, Sam. You know, he's gone from Clios to Porsches to touring cars, front-wheel drive touring car, rear-wheel drive touring car, and he's mastered them all. So there's no reason, I think, to suggest that as he gets more familiar with this car, he's not going to be a real star.
Well, absolutely, and Sam Tordoff has certainly kicked off the season well. The car that he shares with Liam Griffin finished second. It was a Lamborghini 1-2 in the opening race of the championship, the first race here that was held at 11 o'clock this morning. So this second hour is also, second race is also an hour-long mandatory pit stop. So the organisers have mandated who driver 1 and driver 2 is in the car based on their previous experience, their driving level, whether they're a silver, a gold or a bronze level driver. And so the first named driver starts race 1, the second named driver starts race 2, being the, quote, pro of the Pro-Am category.
That's Callum McLeod in Ian Loggie's Bentley. Ian Loggie is the follically challenged gentleman crouched down by the side of the car. Callum, if you have a long memory, you might remember, was the man that beat Nick Tandy to the Formula 4 Championship in the UK. Nick, of course, now Le Mans winner, factory Porsche driver. People have rather forgotten about Callum McLeod, but he is still a very competitive driver and has found a happy home of late driving for Stuart Parker's eponymous squad in sports car racing, GT racing, and he will go first in number 7. So you've got Bentley, Lamborghini, Lamborghini, Bentley at the front of the grid, and then lining up 5th is this Aston Martin with John Barnes at the wheel, and then go back to 11th on the grid. You find another Aston Martin, you find Johnny Adam at the wheel of it, and stood next to the car, you find Alex.
Well, right at the back of the GT3 grid is not where you should be sitting, but you made a lovely leaps and bounds during race 1. More of the same?
Yeah, that's the plan. It's obviously a lot drier now than race 1. Just on the reconnaissance lap there to the grid, it's still a bit damp halfway through the lap, but the rest of the lap looks quite dry. So we'll try and make our way forward. Obviously, this is my first turn of laps in the dry, really, this weekend. But the car felt good there just on the 8 lap, so we'll see what we could do.
There was a bit of a tricky qualifying. Can you explain to us exactly what happened?
Yeah, I'm not 100%. I think Derek was starting a lap and Lee was finishing one, and unfortunately they both went for the same bit of tarmac. So yeah, it put us on the back foot a bit for race 1 with where we started, but Derek drove a really good first stint. The weather sort of played in our favour really, because a few others fell off, so we kind of came through, but it's a level playing field now. Everyone's on slicks just now, so we'll see what we could do for race 2. Thank you.
And also to make the point that Johnny Adam wasn't here on Saturday, so he could not do his qualifying session. He was at Silverstone qualifying for the World Endurance Championship race that was yesterday. So when he got here this morning, and this is true of Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin, who are in a Ferrari on this grid as well, he had to do 3 laps to fulfill the requirement to qualify. You have to do 3 laps in order to race. He did that, so he's in the race, but he goes to the back of the GT3 part of the grid, not the whole grid. For safety reasons, GT3 will always start ahead of GT4, irrespective of your time. It's a safer way of doing it, and so Johnny Adam wasn't here, couldn't do a time, goes to the back of that group, but alongside him is Matt Griffin, and Matt is another absolute star. And so with those 2 drivers, Johnny Adam 11th and Matt Griffin 12th in the Spirit of Race branded, entered Ferrari, you've got 2 cars to watch. I know the attention will be on the leaders at the start, but those 2 drivers, both of whom are part of manufacturer factory programs, are going to be well worth watching. Mike Simpson, who's the sales director for Ginetta, is good to go, number 111. He was up the escape road at Tislops in the first race, but he got a knock by a Bentley to put him there, he reckons. So he said there was no stopping once I got hit by a Bentley.
And Anna Valeska there will take over halfway through the race. They're starting on pole in the GT4 category. Ginetta with a slew of cars in that category, also running GT3 cars.
And McLaren is the opposition, the 570S. Kieran Haggerty will go first in number 100. So there is an awful lot to look forward to in round 2 of the British GT Championship, and it gets underway the other side of the break. So the field is ready to go, and this looking down onto the grid, stretching all the way back to Deer Leap. It's going to be a rolling start, of course. We've got 9 different manufacturers. GT4 very competitive as well. McLaren taking on Ginetta and Aston Martin and Nissan, and the Porsche Cayman in the entry as well. So GT4 grows all the time. There is the sole Porsche on the grid. There are some teams running them in GT3, but in British GT this year, only GT4 representation. And the engineers now making their way off into the pit lane. At the 1 minute board, all the engines will fire up, the grid will be cleared, and then we will get set for what promises to be another fascinating race with a very different looking grid this time around.
And you can see from the camera shots on the track, as we can from the window of our commentary position, that it is pretty much a dry track. It's not warm, and so the track temperature is very low indeed. It's been dry, wet, dry most of the weekend. There are little patches of water. You can see the shiny patches right around the fringes of the track, but most of the racing surface, and not just on the racing line. See, right down in the bottom of the left-hand corner, you see a little patch of damp, and just along around the white lines. You always want to stay off the white lines when it's been raining, because they will lead you onto the grass, because it's like ice, wet paint. But the track itself predominantly is dry. Now, whether it remains that way or not is an entirely different question. Rain lights are on. The race has not been declared wet. Now that means that everybody therefore will start on slick tyres, and so if we do get a deluge, the race director will have the opportunity to either red flag it or throw out the safety car for safety grounds, allow everybody to come and change tyres. But at the moment, actually, it's about the brightest it's been all day. The weather, not me. And the track is dry. Well, I've had chocolate. I'm feeling pretty good to go so far. There is your pole sitter. That is Seb Morris. Not in the door, in the car. Team Parker Racing Bentley. And as you said, David, Bentley, Lambo, Bentley. And then behind them, John Barnes in the TF Sport Aston Martin with the number 24 car, James Littlejohn. That's the one that was doing an imitation of the Flying Scotsman on the grid for the first race. It had just blown a water hose, and the engine appears to be fine. So it's an all Aston Martin row 3, with Century Motorsports Charlie Robertson in the first of the GT3 Ginettas on row 4.
Now, number 24 did 11 laps, really, as a test session. This is the car Martin's just been talking about, the troubled Aston Martin in race 1. 11 laps it did as a test rather than the 33 of the winner. So they are on the back foot in terms of mileage. You don't get another practice session before this. So any laps they did within that first race is all they know as to whether the car is good or not. So fingers crossed for them, because that's a good combination of drivers as well in the number 24 Aston. Jack Mitchell and James Littlejohn ones to watch. The grid is formed. We are just about ready for race 2. Welcome back to Oulton Park. We are ready for round 2 of the British GT Championship for 2017. What a grid this is. The front row is Bentley and Lamborghini. Seb Morris and Phil Keane will go toe-to-toe on the run down towards Old Hall Corner at the end of the next formation lap. The second row, Touring Car Championship runner-up Sam Tordoff and Callum McLeod, former Formula 4 champion, alongside him. It's an all Aston Martin row 3, John Barnes and James Littlejohn. You've got Youth and Guile on the next row. Charlie Robertson is the Youth, Martin Short is the Guile, the very experienced Martin Short alongside. Nathan Freak and Ryan Ratcliffe share row 5, row 6. Johnny Adam and Matt Griffin, both of whom weren't here for the qualifying session. They were at Silverstone, and those two on the opening few laps of the race coming through are going to be well worth watching.
A racing Ferrari that's in green and white rather than red. It's absolutely a rarity, maybe the only one in captivity, but it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. And down there towards the tail of the field, you can see one of the Nissan 370Zs run by Bob Neville's RGN team in the GT4 class.
Yeah, Kelvin Fletcher, former Armadale actor at the wheel of it. He had a spell in the British Touring Car Championship. He was a winner here when he started his racing in Mighty Minis, and a great motor racing enthusiast is Kelvin, and a good bloke, and deciding to step away from the spotlight at the BTCC and come and enjoy his racing in GTs, and he has done just that so far this weekend. That was Johnny Adam going through shot. Let's have a look at how the grid lines up, with Seb Morris, Phil Keane row 1, Sam Tordoff and Callum McLeod on the second row of the grid. Then on row 3, got the Mark Farmer, John Barnes, Aston Martin alongside James Littlejohn. Then it's Charlie Robertson and Martin Short. Nathan Freak and Ryan Ratcliffe come next. Then Johnny Adam and Matt Griffin ahead of Mike Simpson and Kieran Haggerty. David Pittard is one to watch in GT4 alongside Martin Plowman, one to watch in GT4, and so too is Scott Mulvern. Next on the grid, Joe Osborne. Then you've got Mike Robinson and former F4 German Championship racer Jan Jonk in his Aston Martin goes from 20th on the grid. Lining up 21st is Adam Mackay, who along with Adam Ballon won GT4 in the first race. Alongside is Stuart Middleton for HHC Motorsport. Then you've got Matty Graham. Behind him on the grid, it is going to be the Chapman Webster, then Adam McDonald McLaren. Gareth Howell comes next ahead of Matt Nicol-Jones, and then to complete the grid is going to be Kelvin Fletcher. So the grid is going to slot into the 2x2 Noah's Ark formation for the rolling start. It was Phil Keane and John Minshaw who drew first blood earlier on in the day in the British GT Championship. What does round 2 have in store?
Safety car will pull off and race 2 of the British GT Championship will get underway here at Oulton Park. The big white and green Bentley on pole position, that is being driven by Seb Morris. Alongside him, the race 1 winning Lamborghini Phil Keane for Barwell Automotive, and immediately John Barnes in the chrome, blue and white Aston Martin jumping up front. It's Lamborghini lead, Bentley side by side. That could go very badly wrong. Good start from James Littlejohn in the Aston to go 5th. John Barnes though, the best of the starts from behind. He's up to 4th place already, ahead of Johnny Adam with the black colour. And the car number 100, the GT4 McLaren that led until the pit stops when it fell way down the order, has got a problem right from the start. But the Lamborghini is leading as it did right at the start in the first race. Wet or dry, he's jumped in front.
Number 100, we understand, has stopped on track. Kieran Haggerty at the wheel. There was a bit of contact in GT4 going into Old Hall Corner as well. Number 100 has got going again, but clearly there's a problem. Might be electrical, you have to do a reset. But meantime, it is Phil Keane leading the way as they hustle their way up out of Britain's for the first time, heading over hilltop. So Lamborghini leads the way, then Bentley second, Bentley third. You see the pack swarming through, and there's one there with damage. I told you there was contact in GT4. There is evidence, because 56 it is that goes through, which is Joe Osborne. He's got damage and may have to pit at the end of lap 1 as 33. Phil Keane leads the way, heading up Clay Hill for the first time.
Very wet there, wasn't it, at the first chicane, and that's part of the building work they've been doing is causing that sort of minor flooding there.
Second and third, the 2 Bentleys then. So you've got at the moment Seb Morris trying to fend off Callum McLeod. Martin Short turns through, keeping at bay Nathan Freak as they drop down towards the end of the lap. And in fact, Callum McLeod up into second place. So he was on road 2, but he's got himself up ahead of Seb Morris. Phil Keane leading the way. Wiper on for Nathan Freak. Ginetta. Damage there to Mike Simpson's car. So that was another legacy of the skirmish at Old Hall Corner. 1 lap in the book, and over the line comes Phil Keane. Now he leads the way at the moment, but remember, they have to serve 10 extra seconds in the pit, so he's got to pull out at least 10 before the window opens.
Well, they had about a 20-second lead in the wet weather conditions before the pit stops in race 1, but the Bentleys are much closer, and the Bentleys were not running 2-3. They never ran nose to tail from start to finish in the race. And the second of the Lamborghinis down in 5th position, that's Sam Tordoff. He's just losing. Oh, and smoke behind. Somebody locking up going into the Shell Oils hairpin behind John Barnes. Aston in 4th place. Have we lost the... No, the Lamborghini's still there in 5th. But James Littlejohn... No, it's not James, it's...
Johnny Adam.
Johnny Adam all over the back of him. Then James Littlejohn in the next Aston Martin. And then the first of the 2 Mercedes. They run nose to tail. Lee Mole ahead of Martin Short and Nathan Freak. And we're going to get a change between the 2. Oh, contact! Now the number 7 car, Callum McLeod, being spun around as Seb Morris gets into his door. Never hit your teammate.
What's the first rule of racing? You don't hit your teammate, you're dead right, and that is exactly what they've done. Callum McLeod survives, but that is going to go down like a cup of cold sick, isn't it, at Team Parker Racing. Seb Morris then gains the place. Now, Matt Griffin not making the same progress up the order as Johnny Adam, but give him another lap or so and he might start to come alive as the leaders work their way down to Lodge. It is Phil Keane leading, and of course that incident has played into his hands because the gap is bigger. The two teammates drive into each other. Keane leads the way, coming over the line. Second now is Morris, third is John Barnes, fourth is Tordoff, fifth is Adam, sixth is Callum McLeod after being tagged into the spin, seventh is James Littlejohn, gap back, eighth now is Ryan Ratcliffe, ninth is Martin Short, 10th is Nathan Freakin, 11th over the timing line is Matt Griffin, who's got work to do, and there he is, 21, Matt Griffin in the Ferrari, tries the outside line, going down towards Old Hall. He couldn't do it there. He's desperately trying to find a Ferrari's width, and it's just not there, is it?
Not at the moment, but he's a persistent type. Now the question reigns, of course, is how much new tyre they had left for this second race. Might be that somebody has a little bit more rubber under the car at the beginning, and in the opening couple of laps that might still have a big part to play. Most of the teams will be already trying to plan when they're going to stop for the pits, but the Bentleys, dear oh dear. Well, Seb Morris lunging down the inside, and he knew he was in trouble all the way there. He was trying to stay off the curbs so that the car would stop, but he was trying to keep as far to the right as possible. In the cap there's his teammate Rick Parfitt, and he worries now not only that Bentley have gone from being 2-3 to being 2-6, which is not good, but also that the stewards will look at that as you've knocked somebody out of the way and taken the place.
And we might therefore redress the balance. There might be a penalty looming, you're absolutely right. There is Mike Simpson's rather dog-eared Ginetta that's trying to fall apart as he goes through. He's got Martin Plowman behind him in the Nissan. Now, Martin Plowman is another of those British drivers that, to use the phrase, flies under the radar, but hugely talented. He's got Scott Malvern, former Formula Ford champion, behind him in the Porsche Cayman. Great-looking car, that. So Ginetta, Nissan, Porsche up towards Druids as they work their way now through Druids. There is contact between number 100 and the 111 Ginetta of Mike Simpson under investigation. This is the onboard view from number 100. You're riding with Kieran Haggerty. Mike Simpson to the right, GT3 traffic ahead. Lights are out, we're racing down towards Old Hall Corner then. So you're riding with Kieran Haggerty. He's got the inside line, and then there's contact with the Nissan.
Well, that's because the Ginetta was inside him, and he tried to close the door, and it didn't really work. The Ginetta still leads, but look at that. That is the top 5 in GT4. You could cover them with the proverbial pocket handkerchief.
Seb Morris gets a drive-through penalty. Number 31 Bentley of Seb Morris gets a drive-through penalty for punting his teammate out of the way effectively. So around went Callum McLeod, and Seb Morris gets a drive-through penalty. What a battle in GT4. Look at this. Tremendous lead scrap. We've got 5 of them in a line, and so much variety as well in this, all these different shapes and sizes as they work their way up around Shell Oil's corner. But Seb Morris and Rick Parfitt's race has just unravelled.
Bentley's race per se.
Yeah, indeed.
62 excluded from race 1. They're in race 2 early into the pits, and that looks like it might be an overheating problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, close as you like. In the lead of the GT4 class, Mike Simpson out front, and Martin Plowman, you're absolutely right. Plowy there in the Nissan, going left to right, left to right. Raced a lot in the States in the last few years. Raced at Le Mans as well in prototypes. Very, very good pair of hands, and I think he's come back to the UK to re-establish his career here. Drive-through being served by Seb Morris, but where's this going to leave him? Deep in the GT4 field is the answer. 9th, 10th are going to go by him. Matt Griffin. Okay, so there's Lee Mole, and there is Martin Short versus Matt Griffin. Griffin goes through now as he gets by Shorty for 9th place. And the Bentley is going to come out not second, but just in front of them.
Yeah, it's going to be just ahead of GT4, which is getting ever so Lariat Lodge, isn't it? Mike Simpson, he's only just ahead of Martin Plowman. That Ginetta is getting to the point where the scrutineers are going to want it in because it's falling apart around the left front corner. Look at it. Yep. He's lost the lead. Past him goes Martin Plowman, but look, the front left corner is just falling apart. There's more flappage going on as the bodywork tries to part company. Scott Malvern is on the tail as well. It's a great battle, this, but I fear for the Ginetta how long it's going to last. Malvern in the Porsche to the inside. Elbows out. Take that. Come on, goes Malvern.
Yeah.
Through the gravel. The Ginetta spins as well.
Well, that was Malvern. The biter was big there, wasn't he? You know, he didn't really have an overlap, and he was just trying to hang on in there. And through then, up into second place now in GT4. He's gone to 72 McLaren. And he goes around the number 51 Ginetta. So that is second and third. And there's another Ginetta there in 4th place. The champions, the 501 car, Mike Robinson. And unfortunately, the Porsche is taking a very long time to come back on track. So Mike Simpson went off. and Martin Plowman is your GT4 leader. And look how small the Nissan looks compared to the wide-mouthed frog that is the McLaren.
But look at the lead he's got as well. But now the man doing the chasing in 72 is Adam Mackay. They're 5:01, that is last year's GT4 champions Mike Robinson and Graham Johnson. And 51 also in that little battle is the David Pittard, Alex Reed Ginetta. David Pittard, another much underrated young driver. Very quick, very personable young driver as well. And somebody else that deserves a break. So, race order. Phil Keane it is who leads the way. John Barnes chasing after him in second place. Third is Sam Tordoff. But Keane has an advantage of 4 seconds as they work their way down towards Lodge.
And look at the balance we've got here in GT4. You've got 2 hypercar McLarens versus 2 Ginettas built in Leeds. So supercars built in Woking versus supercars built in Leeds. And here we've got supercars built in Sant'Agata, the Lamborghinis, versus supercars built in Gaydon in Oxfordshire in the form of the Aston Martins. And, you know, the sights, the sounds, the different colour schemes, the different layouts, you know, big front-engine cars, mid-engine cars, everything here that you could possibly want in motor racing.
So the lead gap 4 seconds, Keane to Barnes, and this is now second, third and fourth. Barnes, Tordoff, Johnny Adams. So he's made good progress, hasn't he, Johnny? Up from 11th on the grid, and he's also set the fastest lap of the race, and he's now looking for a way past Sam Tordoff. Johnny knows Aston Martins and GT racing inside out. Sam Tordoff, no mean racer, but new to this discipline, and is he going to get a work over by Johnny Adam as they head down towards Old Hall? Is there a gap on the inside? Not this time.
You're looking at the fastest 2 cars on track. Johnny Adam with the black and white Aston Martin #1 is absolutely the fastest in the race. Sam Tordoff's last lap, when Johnny set that fastest lap, was the second fastest lap of the race. So those 2 are closing in on John Barnes in the chrome blue and white Aston Martin in second place. It might not be long before we have a Lamborghini 1-2 again in race 2 as we had in race 1.
Now, all of that about Johnny Adam, scrap that for fastest lap, because Seb Morris has done the fastest lap. His dander is up, to use a phrase. He's going to be furious with himself, and he knows he has got to redeem himself before the pit stops. He needs a safety car to bring them back into the mix, but for now, Seb Morris, 7th, fastest man on the circuit, doing his best to claw that car back into contention. Here they come, look, lights are flashing. That was Callum McLeod, who's also pretty revved up after being tagged into the spin. He's hustling on behind Johnny Adam.
Yeah, Callum McLeod in the other Bentley, the number 7 car, that's him there. He's in 5th position, 8 seconds, 9 seconds back now is Seb Morris, coming up like a steam train. So at some stage in the not too distant future, Seb Morris is going to be coming up to try and get by McLeod again. Oh dear.
Oh good. Yes, take 2.
Yes, so everybody else will be rubbing their hands, and everybody in the Parker Racing Garage will just be hiding their face in their hands.
And then, of course, you put different drivers in the cars later on. Yes. It can happen again. On board with Tordoff now, staring at the back of John Barnes. Blue flag to the back marker. That is Scott Malvern, a long way back now after that incident down at Cascades. He's still behind Mike Simpson, so even though they both lost a chunk of time, the order didn't change. Barnes runs second, Tordoff third, and then you've got Johnny Adam fourth, and Callum McLeod illustrating why he was so good in Formula Ford all those years ago. Right on the back, and then he makes a mistake and goes off the road. Oh, Callum, you've let me down. Through the gravel, over the grass, he's almost on the road the wrong way. On the other side of Lakeside Straight, he goes through the markers, and that's really torn it now. Getting a big heavy car off wet, friction-free grass, and Ian Loggy knows that that is possibly the end.
Wow. From second and third, Bentley are now barely anywhere and nowhere at all. How could they possibly have let it go so badly wrong? This is Seb Morris, the onboard. He's right behind James Littlejohn. They've both picked up a place, or will have done shortly, as they go by the stationary car they already have of Callum McLeod. And so if Seb Morris had moments to see it, and racing drivers have that acuity, he'd have seen the other Bentley off on the grass and thought, what the heck's happened there? Oh, well, at least I won't have to get by him this time. Yes. But for the moment, James Littlejohn, in his first race in this car, made a couple of, well, he can't have 2 one-off appearances, but you know what I mean, in British GT about 8 or 9 years ago. But effectively, this is his first, well, it's certainly his first full season starting in British GT, and a brand new Aston Martin for this team, so the first time they've run this. So they're hoping that they'll actually get to the end of this one and get some vital points.
Seb Morris lining him up for a move on the inside at Lodge. Here he comes, Bentley at the inside, and they touch. Seb Morris, again, being very forceful. Well, he's had 1 penalty. the race officials are going to be keeping a close eye on him. Seb is quick. I know these are big cars and it's a narrow road and all of that, but again, did he need to do it quite like that?
Well, you've got to take your chances, and you know, it's an hour-long race, but it could be won by a fraction of a second. It wouldn't be the first time, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. So you do have to make those moves stick. Now, we just saw behind Matt Griffin, he's cleared Ryan Ratcliffe and as well Martin Short. So Matt Griffin in the Ferrari already up to 7th, James Littlejohn down to 8th. And Seb Morris has moved up the order. Problems we're hearing for Sam Tordoff. He's lost 4 seconds. Yes, his last lap was a 1:40.8. That suggests to me a grassy excursion. Very slow Ginetta there. That was the Simpson-Valeska car, wasn't it? Going very slowly, the blue and yellow car. I think he was just trying to stay out of the way. In fact, it wasn't. It's got all its front end, so it wasn't that. But the leaders are coming through now into tail end GT4 traffic again.
And I just wonder whether it was partly traffic that had some of the problem for Sam Tordoff. If he got caught up in the slower cars as well, that might also have been part of it. But let's see what the next lap is, because if he's responded, then we'll know that it was just a blip. There is John Barnes, who is second. Johnny Adam is third. And Tordoff then, having fallen back into 4th place, he's still going. And there's a suspicion there might be a misfire. Now let's see if we can go on board and have a listen. Here he comes down towards Lodge Corner, turns through.
Oh,
doesn't
that
sound right
horrible.
at all. Yeah.
So that's either a broken exhaust or...
Riding with him. Listen, listen.
Oh, and look in the mirrors, you can see on his onboard camera, car coming up hard behind and gone by already. The Bentley has taken him, so Seb Morris goes blinding right by Sam Tordoff as we're on board. You saw the little rear view camera, the Bentley just came steaming right by him, and
Griffin through.
It's dead.
It's dead.
The
It's
lights
slow
are
right
off.
down.
So it wasn't a mechanical. He's done Control-Alt-Delete. Yeah, all the lights went off and then they all came back on. That's something in the wiring loom. That's not a cylinder gone or dropped a valve. That's an electrical misfire.
Fastest lap of the race, Matt Griffin. So the Ferrari now with clear road is speeding up. So Sam Tordoff's Lamborghini with a big problem. He was getting slower and slower, and now as he tries to get back into contention, he will lose yet more time as he does that reset. Callum McLeod, incidentally, has done another better lap, even quicker than that of Matt Griffin.
And look at our GT4 leader. You just saw Martin Plowman disappear. The McLaren here with the white nose.
Seb Morris
has overcooked it again, and James Littlejohn goes by, retakes that position from him. And now Ratcliffe and Short won't be far behind.
That's Sam Tordoff out of the race. There's the stricken Lamborghini.
So no chance of a Lambo 1-2. Well, it's been a bit of an interesting weekend that he won't forget as his first ever at British GT, hasn't it? With all one thing and another.
But Seb Morris, this is not like him. I mean, we've seen him in 2 incidents, and now he's had a spin. Yellow flags wave because of the stricken Barwell Lamborghini. Seb Morris, we know he's a very good, accomplished driver, former single-seater gun before he came into GT racing, but this is a different Seb Morris than the one we normally see. He's in the traffic. Phil Keane there gets up the inside to put a lap on the Nissan. Easily through, and now sprints away. So that is Martin Plowman. He's just put a lap on in 53, who leads GT4. So that shows you how far up the order a quick GT3 car can get. 43 minutes to go, and we're not that far away from the pit window opening. Now, let's try and catch up on Matters Bentley. Seb Morris having this really checkered race, and this is the replay. Comes into his lops, a little bit deep, accelerates out of the corner. This is Knickerbrook, and the back's getting away from him, and he just can't hold it.
Tyre on the grass, left rear was on the grass, and that was never ever coming back to him from there. He was on the gas and it just spun up the left rear, and that just dragged him off the circuit. So yeah, you come out wide here from the final element of the Knickerbrook chicane, and if you drift out onto the grass, in the dry you'll get away with it. It'll be a bit bumpy, a bit dusty, you'll lose some traction, but in the wet it's like sheet ice, you go straight off. And so here he is again, and the words over and driving are not often used about Seb Morris, but he really was over driving in that instant when he got by James Littlejohn, and there where he just put it off on the dirt. So behind him, another of our GT4 battles. This is the number 63 car. That's Matt Chapman in the RCIB Insurance Racing car. And here is the battle for second in the GT4 category. The 73 McLaren still trying to hang on as Martin Plowman vanishes like he's in a GT3 car in front. There he is.
And that McLaren is being given a driving standards flag, presumably for using too much curb. Johnny Adam up the inside of Martin Plowman. Two professional drivers there. Johnny Adam goes through up on the inside. He is running in third place. There, 72, which is Adam Mackay. David Pittard up behind him, up almost alongside him now. Is he going to be able to go through? Yeah. No, not quite. Slots back in behind him. So here they come, up towards the Britons. And David Pittard oh so nearly made the move, but it just wasn't quite right there. So the McLaren fends him off as they come over hilltop. Behind you've got another of the McLarens, 29 Matty Graham's car, and they're second. The 570S in the hands of Adam Mackay hustles on up through Knickerbrook. There's the Hislop chicane and then the old Knickerbrook corner. This is Clay Hill they're about to climb, and then on towards Druids, past Water Tower. And the double apex right at Druids is the next part of the circuit. The race leader has done 11 laps. This is the fight second in GT4 you're looking at. There is the race leader, and turning through Old Hall Corner is Phil Keane, still building that advantage. And the teams, there is Barwell getting ready for the pit stops. The pit window will be open in about 5 minutes time. And this is the car that has never been headed all day. 9.8 seconds is the advantage, but an extra 10 seconds in the pit stop. Phil Keane still needs to push. We'll be back at Oulton Park for the pit stops in a couple of minutes.
Well, you can see exactly what Phil Keane needs to do. And if in the next, well, we've got another 5 minutes, he will have likely more than a 10-second advantage, but it's not going to be a 20-second advantage or even a 15 seconds advantage. He is going to be very, very tight with John Barnes in second place, Johnny Adam in third, are only separated by a second. So our top three could conceivably, after the pit stops, be separated by just a second. Johnny Adam and the TF Sport number 1 car that currently lies in third place have got a 5-second addition to their pit stop time. And the other car that was penalised or has time added for being on the podium, of course, is the Lamborghini that Sam Tordoff has had to pull off at the side of the road. So Matt Griffin goes through the GT4 battle. Griffin in 4th place, 15 seconds behind the leaders, so that brings him into the frame as well. Definitely. With that 10-second penalty.
And this is the battle for second on track. John Barnes ahead of Johnny Adam. And the way that Johnny is going suggests that he might be able to get himself up and past even before the pit stops. Let's see as the 2 Aston Martins run down to Old Hall Corner. Round 2 of British GT 2017, the race-leading Lamborghini Phil Keane up the road. This, the battle for second, Aston Martin versus Aston Martin, John Barnes versus Johnny Adam. And another Aston Martin, that of James Littlejohn, earlier on in the race, and was given a bit of a bump by a charging Seb Morris, and that incident is going to be investigated after the race. But for now, all eyes on the fight for second as we approach the pit window.
And a battle of 2 champions as well, John Barnes and Johnny Adam, both previous British GT champions.
That's right.
So, you know, they know the series well, they know the track well, both of them know these cars well. Here's our second place battle in the GT4 class, the slower group of cars. Although if you were sitting in the passenger seat, slower is what you'd be screaming rather than your impression of just how quickly these cars are going. Number 72 McLaren is Adam Mackay, and the number 32 McLaren, we're just hearing a message on the radio about that, but I didn't quite catch it.
It means Seb Morris, I think, has got ahead of James Littlejohn again, and he's also got GT4 cars to negotiate. Seb Morris has drawn attention to himself in this race. He punted his teammate off, he banged across the front of James Littlejohn, and he had a spin, but when he's keeping out of trouble, he's going really well.
Yes. Well, now he could be leading had he not had those incidents. He was in third place behind his Bentley teammate and the Lamborghini. They were covered in the opening couple of laps by a couple of seconds, not even, 1.5 maybe. So if he'd gone into the pit lane in that position, he'd have come out in front. But he wanted to go in the pit lane in the lead, and so he tried to get by his teammate, didn't work, and unfortunately That has slightly undone their race and the race of their teammates.
Fastest lap, still that of Callum McLeod, as there, Ryan Ratcliffe in Lee Mole's Mercedes gets up the inside of the GT4 McLaren. 7th is Ryan Ratcliffe, who's come out of Ginetta Racing. Had a go in the 888 BMW Z4 in Blancpain a few years ago, and he's a quick driver, so one to keep an eye to. Lee Mole will take over. Remember, the second stint is primarily the AMs, and we'll see how that pans out and who is the quicker of the AM drivers. In this context, you've got Derek Johnston to replace Johnny Adam and Mark Farmer to replace John Barnes, and Derek Johnston is the quicker of those two, so the Johnny Adam car is very well placed for a win at the moment.
Pit lane opens with 35 minutes to go, i.e. a minute from now, closes with 25 minutes of the race remaining. This is the battle for second. Leader Phil Keane 11.2 seconds clear at the beginning of this lap, but has to serve an extra 10 seconds on top of the mandatory minimum time of 65 seconds for a GT3 pit stop. So effectively he is 1.3 seconds in front of this battle post pit stop. Now that assumes no dramas in the pit lane, no mistakes by any drivers or by any of the teams, but it will be very close. You can't see the leader until you take a look at him on his own, but after the pit stops, winning the first race and having that extra 10 seconds to spend in the pit lane, that's going to have a very germane effect on their pace in the second race.
At the moment, box ticked, he's 11 seconds ahead, so he's pulled out the margin needed for that extra time in the pits. But if Johnny Adam were to get up and pass John Barnes and start eating into that deficit, it could be a whole different story and go into part 2 of the race. Let's put Derek Johnston, for the sake of argument, up against John Minshaw for the win. That's going to be quite a battle, Lamborghini versus Aston Martin. So this race, good as it is now, I suspect it's going to get better and better, because now the pit window is open. But when do you bring your driver in? Well, you want your AM in as quickly as, and you want to put your pro in as soon as, but here you've got the pros doing the first stint, so for this race you keep them out for as long as possible, so they will do as many laps as they can to make sure they come in just before the pit window closes.
So if you're the team manager here of John Barnes, car number 11, do you want to bring him in immediately, or do you want to keep the number 1 car bottled up? Because if you let Johnny Adam go by stopping early and they don't stop at the same time, Johnny Adam might go quicker and eke out maybe even a couple of seconds, enough to still be in front after the pit stop. So there's an awful lot of trying to second guess what everybody else is likely to do, as well as looking at your isolated position on its own. The Ginetta here in 3rd place in GT4 between these two McLarens. You want to get out from behind the McLaren because you can't get by him now, so straight into the pits now. Do your pit stop now and hope that they don't peel off into the pit lane at the same time.
29 goes through, which is the GT4 McLaren, Matty Graham at the wheel of it, and he's on the tail of the Ginetta. You see the way the McLarens are quicker going up Clay Hill there.
Well, Matty Graham on the podium in race 1 here last year in an Aston Martin. This deal came together really late in the season, or in the pre-season for him. Only last week was it announced that he was going to join the Intu Racing McLaren team. He'd had a bit of a test in the Maserati not on the grid this weekend. Whether we see one later in the season remains to be seen, but that deal come together quite late and he's very excited. Well, there you go, Ginetta comes in immediately, exactly the logical thing to do. You know you're stuck behind the car, you can go faster, let's not waste any more time, let's do the driver change now. And in fact, he's the only car on pit road at the moment. He's the only one in who's actually got a healthy car. Matt Nicol-Jones's car is in and has stayed in, so the 62 Aston will score no points all weekend, but that then leaves Car 100 is in. That had problems earlier on as well, didn't it? And they lost race 1. We're on board with them as they pull up to the board. You see they pull in at an angle, not a full side-on pit stop. There's just not enough room for all these cars.
Leader through, and that herringbone formation is because there just isn't the room to have the cars nose to tail, so you have to, for safety reasons, park them, as you say, in that angled formation. Right, the race leading gap is going up 13 seconds, but after the extra 10 in the pits, it's going to be much less. It's going to be a great second stint in this race. A lot's happened in the first one, don't get me wrong, and second place man John Barnes chasing on. Now there, 69 heading down towards Hislop's Nathan Freak, that's the leader. Phil Keane, the Lamborghini, charging on it, absolutely crushed the opposition in the first race, but he heads up now towards the Britain's chicane with a 13-second advantage. Pit window is open, so John Minshaw will be getting ready, and he will take over this car. It is going to be Mark Farmer who will take over from John Barnes. It'll be Derek Johnston to take over from Johnny Adam. Now, in 4th place, it is Matt Griffin, and he will give way to Duncan Cameron. That's Ian Loggy ready to take over from Callum McLeod as the Bentley 31. Seb Morris, who will give way to Rick Parfitt, storms on. Now, where is Seb after his travails? Pretty astonishingly, he's still in 5th place.
Yes. He's gone all the way down from 3rd to 5th after an incident and a spin. Car 100 rejoins, so they have completed their pit stop in GT4, and at least the car's left the pits on time this time, whereas they lost the race lead when a left rear wheel wouldn't go on. Phil Keane is coming in, or is he? No, he continues on for at least another lap. Honestly, they're so far in front, and he is the quicker of the pair. There's no question about that in John Minshaw's mind either. They will leave him out until the last possible minute to build as much of an advantage above and beyond the 75 seconds that they'll have to spend compared to everybody else's 65.
And the same is true of these cars as well. You keep your quicker pro driver in for as long as you possibly can. So through Old Hall Corner goes John Barnes. It was with James Gornwell he won the championship a few years ago, the Viper. He turns his way now through Cascades. Johnny Adam, double champion, and they are trading lap times. They are separated in terms of a lap time by 28 thousandths of a second. That is how evenly matched they are.
And the reason that they're not bringing Johnny Adam in now is that actually he's not being badly held up by John Barnes. They are only a couple of hundreds slower per lap than Phil Keane, the race leader. So actually, empirically, the two Astons together work quicker, they work better in the air on the fast bits than the one Lamborghini on its own. So their top speed as a pair will actually be better. That's why you see cyclists slipstream, because it benefits everybody. So they'll stay together, and actually that's really good thinking from two separate teams.
That is Martin Short about to morph into Richard Neary. Also, though, against Johnny Adam was that he just got caught out by the Scott Malvern Porsche.
Yeah.
Not deliberately, but the car had to be somewhere at some point, and that just cost him a little bit of time. But I would have thought Johnny Adam would easily make that back up. There's Nathan Freak in to give the Ginetta over to Harry Gottsacker. And you've got GT4 in, you've got the McLaren, for example. Now, does Phil Keane come in? No, of course not. He'll stay out because the pit window is still open. He pushes on, working his way through the traffic. More and more GT4 cars head for the pit lane. But Phil Keane, that last lap was a 36.5, and doing his best to continue to build this advantage. There is 5:01, the reigning GT4 champion, so Mike Robinson gives way to Graham Johnson in the BMW Expo Racing Optimum Motorsport run car, and being pushed backwards there is the Mercedes, the roll centre car. That's now got Richard Neary at the wheel. In comes Johnny Adam, though, so he's out of the traffic. Is this an inspired move? There's Derek Johnston, ex-Ferrari racer, ex-Radical champion, British GT champion last year, and a co-driver's work is not yet done, because the first thing you have to do is strap in your co-driver.
But don't forget, there's only 4 minutes left on the pit window, so they've gone a decent portion into it. It's a 20-minute window. They've gone almost 15 minutes, or had gone 15 minutes in, so they've got their mileage out of Johnny Adam.
But also, by doing this a lap sooner than John Minshaw, for example, when John Minshaw comes out of the pit lane and has to push, Derek Johnston is already at least one lap into his stint, so he knows the car, knows the track conditions, knows the feel. He's that bit more confident, but the brakes are alight on the Aston Martin.
Well, the brake temperature will be working somewhere around 900 to 1,000 degrees Celsius. That'll be a little bit of rubber. As the tyres wear, they flick off tiny little grains of rubber. You know, like when you're peeling chewing gum off your shoe. Well, that's exactly what it is. And as you come in, drive offline, you flick those up into the wheel, and they drop down when you're stationary onto the brakes. They catch fire, no major dramas. There is the race leader. He goes round again, but he's not a full lap in front. He's about 7/8 of a lap in front, because you saw that Derek Johnson had already left the pit lane. Now, Phil Keane's going to get held up here by the GT4 car in front of him. That McLaren doesn't do much damage to his lap time, but a little bit.
Down the pit lane comes John Barnes
Yes.
to give way to Mark Farmer there, look, in number 11.
And again, look how clear the pit road is now. So again, that's nice timing. Stay out as long as you can. And 27 minutes by the time he comes around again. Phil Keane could do one more lap and stay out, but they will be playing fast and loose with their pit timings, or they'll just be very, very sensitive. In comes the 31 car, so Team Parker Racing, Seb Morris gets out, presumably to go and sit on the naughty step while Rick Parfitt Jr. gets in.
I was going to say, keep your crash helmet on for a bit, Seb.
Yeah,
somebody might want a word.
And stick a textbook down your pants as well.
Yes, exactly. Right, this is Derek Johnston then, the reigning champion, hustling on in number 1 Aston Martin. Now, when Johnny Adam came into the pits, and of course he was slower coming into the pit lane to cross the timing line, the lead gap was 17 seconds. So that is what we need to monitor. Now, can he come across the line, Derek Johnston, before Mark Farmer rejoins? The race is going to be close because coming out of Deer Leap is Derek Johnston, but it looks as though 11 is going to stay ahead. So Mark Farmer is ahead of Derek Johnston. In other words, the Aston Martins stay in the same order, and actually by a much bigger gap here.
Well, we are not entirely sure, of course, just how accurate the timings have been. Who's given, we're going to give it an extra second just to make sure.
Bear in mind that from third in race 1, Johnny Adams' car had a 5-second extra pit stop anyway, so that's why the gap has grown. Here is the leader, and this car has to serve an extra 10 in the pit lane. So at the end of this next lap, we need to see where the two Astons are relative to this car, which is having a tyre change. Now, if you change tyres in GT4, then there's extra time, but in GT3 there is no extra time, so that's all fine. But interesting that they're taking the chance of putting a second set of boots on, a fresh set of tyres for John Minshaw.
Well, we saw them changing the fronts. Are they doing rears as well? It would seem that you might do if you had a fresher set of tyres. Can't see any work going on at the back. The tyre change takes less time than the driver change, and it's a relaxed pit stop anyway. You can't do less than 65 seconds from the moment you cross the timing beam coming into the pit lane to leaving it. It takes about 20 odd seconds to drive down, so you've got about a 45-second changeover. Then they'll have to wait for their extra 10 seconds on top of all that, and not miscalculate by the driver speeding on his way out of the pit lane.
So there's the leading Lamborghini. The first of the Aston Martins is coming out of Deer Leap. You might just see it there. Look at the back of the shot and wait for the third car in the race, because there now is Derek Johnston. So you've got John Minshaw, local ace, lives down the road, leading the way. Second is Mark Farmer, who came through club level Aston Martin racing into British GT, and then you've got Derek Johnston behind. At the end of this lap that they're on now, we'll start to see the gaps, but John Minshaw still comes out a fair way ahead. This is looking good. He was saying pre-race that the opposition was going to come from Bentley. Well, Bentley took out Bentley.
Shot themselves in both feet, didn't they? Came in with realistically around a 15-second advantage. It does look like about a 5-second advantage, and the fact that they've had to spend 10 seconds longer in the pit lane than the Blue Aston, 3, 4, it's around the 5-second margin, so honours pretty much even. However, Derek Johnston here is definitely not an extra 5 seconds behind the Blue Aston. Don't forget, those two Aston Martins were nose to tail. That's a 2-second gap, it's not a 5-second gap.
But intriguingly, Derek Johnston not as quick in the first sector of this lap as Mark Farmer. I thought he was going to gobble him up, but Mark Farmer is rising to the occasion here. It's a good effort that's being put in by Mark Farmer. Now, somebody else to throw into the melting pot is Duncan Cameron. He has just relieved Matt Griffin of 21 Ferrari in GT4 in the meantime. 501 there, the Ginetta, which has now got Graham Johnson at the wheel, is right on the tail of 29 Marcus Hogarth, who in turn is on the tail of 53 Nissan, which is now Richard Taffender at the wheel of it. They're not battling for the lead of GT4, but it's a great battle nonetheless as they come down towards his lots.
Leader in GT4 is the number 42 Aston Martin of Will Phillips, and there's the 24 sister car.
Weaving through the traffic, yeah.
Well, it's like, oh, there you go. There are the two cars. So the GT4 leader is the first of those two red, white and blue sort of Hesketh-coloured McLarens, Aston Martins.
And here's a change about to happen. Look, because up the inside goes Graham Johnson. He's almost up alongside. Is he going to get ahead of the Nissan? Let's see. Yeah, he's gone by. So that losing a little bit of ground in the Nissan is Richard Taffender. That's the Martin Plowman car from earlier on. Yeah. Richard, I think, would accept that he's not as quick. Now, down towards Lodge Corner. 24 being held up a little bit here.
What's rule 1 of motor racing? Do not hit your teammates. They will manage to get that done. So around the outside, Jack Mitchell, who last year drove the 42 car for the same team. That was the car that he drove last year in GT4 when he made his debut. He's now been promoted to their brand new for the season GT3 car. He's taken over from James Littlejohn. That car currently running just outside the... no, that's the other Mitchell. That car is running in 6th position, the number 24 car. So they've had a good run through this second race.
22 minutes to go. Now, let's look at some gaps, because it is 4.9 seconds Minshaw to Farmer, and then it's 3.6 seconds Farmer to Johnston. So this is what we need to monitor. First to second, 4.9, second to third is 3.6. Are they going to come down before the end of the race? Derek Johnston needs to get up and past Mark Farmer as soon as he possibly can.
Right, just double checking the GT4 class, and at the moment, in fact, no, it's number 100. That is the McLaren. That is the leader in GT4, then the number 51 car, then the number 42 car, Will Phillips at the helm. So there is the battle for second in GT4. Dave Pittard's car, the number 51 car, he started that Lannan Racing car. And there is the McLaren that should perhaps have won the first race for Sandy Mitchell and Kieran Haggerty. And Sandy Mitchell doing the second stint here, he's leading. Now, didn't they come in early? They did come in very early, I think. And we heard the car had a little bit of a problem early on, but it seems to have shaken that off. McLaren certainly had the pace. Last 4 races of last year, very much a front runner. It won the first race for the team in GT4 at Snetterton last year. And look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cars in 2 different categories from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different manufacturers, and that is British GT racing at its very best.
And it was all done without any contact as well.
Yeah, so far they haven't all cleared. This is, our director is admitting he has no idea who's who and what's what. This is just a group of cars. Our producer, our director correcting me there. So the deal here is, it is the Richard Neary Martin Short green and black Mercedes leading the Bentley through. That's the number 77 car, Ian Loggy. So that is 7th and 8th of those 2 green and black and grey cars, going by the GT4 leader.
And also in there, hustling on, is Lee Mole in that Mercedes, who's taken over from Ryan Ratcliffe. So he's 9th, trying to stay with Ian Loggy, who's taken over from Callum McLeod. So 7th, 8th, 9th, with all the GT4 traffic around them. The lead gap has suddenly shot up. It's gone from 4.9 to 7 seconds as John Minshaw is speeding up, and Derek Johnston is now lapping quicker than Mark Farmer. He's catching up onto the back of the second-placed Aston. You can see on the graphic there, it's come down to 1.5 seconds.
Now, behind these GT3 cars, if we can hold the shot, you could actually see that the GT4 top 3 have closed right up, because they've been held up by the wretched fast GT3 cars, outbraking them into corners and forcing them offline and slowing them down. There's Mark Farmer, second place in the TF Sport Aston Martin.
Made a mistake.
And way off goes Mark Farmer, and that might possibly by why he lost a little bit of pace early on, and now maybe putting fresh tyres on the Lamborghini is looking like a genius move.
Yeah, I thought I saw the line look a bit strange when he went in, hence the whoop, but he was off the road, and so Derek Johnston says, good, right, thanks. Don't have to waste time overtaking you, you've done the hard work for me. So now Derek Johnston is 8.6 seconds back from the race leaders. Can he bring the gap down? 8.6 seconds, 18 minutes. Derek Johnston will be flying. Clear road ahead of him. And there is John Minshaw, who leads the way. This car has led just about every lap of the races, plural, over the course of the day. But now the story could be a very different one, because John Minshaw's Lamborghini is up against Derek Johnston, the reigning champion in the Aston Martin. The gap is coming down. We've got just over 18 minutes to go, and the story will continue here at Oulton Park after the break.
So John Minshaw versus Graham Johnson, the reigning champion. Now this is quite an interesting little twist, because they were some of the contenders who came into last year's championship into the final race looking for the title. Oh! And again, trouble for Bentley.
That's Ian Loggy, and he's tangled with Richard Neary's Mercedes at Hilltop.
And
big drama.
And cars off everywhere.
It's going to be a safety car. This is going to throw the race upside down, and I was about to tell you as well that team managers are being summoned to race control, one of whom is Barwell for 33 and the other is the number 1 Aston Martin. But we're going to have the safety car. There is Derek Johnston, who will come through through the mess.
Yeah. And the number 7 Bentley and the number 501 Ginetta, which are front runners in the classes. The 7 Bentley is out of the race.
There's no safety car yet. I mean, the track is virtually blocked. Where are the flags? Where's the safety car to get things sorted out? Still there are no safety car boards, and there's no way the race can continue with all of that debris littering the road.
This is a race that should have had 2 Bentleys on the podium. It's conspiring at the moment to not even have a Bentley in the top half dozen.
Exactly. 63 Ginetta off in avoidance, but
spinning the wheels, can't get back up the hill.
Right, finally the safety car is on standby and is being deployed. About time. So it blasts into the race, but for the drivers coming over hilltop and being confronted with that was a very scary moment indeed. What caused it, we'll try and piece together, but the safety car is out and doesn't pick up the leader. So now it's going to take some unravelling anyway.
Well, here comes the lead now, so it's going to be a wave by for the 2 cars that are behind the safety car. So he got out in front of the leader, but not just in front of the leader. And in fact, that's your GT4 lead button, No, 100 is the leader. I keep getting 59 confused. So that's the McDonald McLaren, the number 59 car. That is not our leader. So safety car is out. We will wait for our TV audience to rejoin us. We're on a commercial break on TV. And there you go, the safety car driver waving by those other 2 cars. Otherwise, they'd have gone a lap down. And he will then have the race leader behind him.
So that has worked well. Well done to the officials for doing that, because quite often we've seen races compromised by safety car glitches. But it brings the lead gap absolutely down, doesn't it? Because, I mean, there you can see the mess. It's largely Bentley bodywork, and the field now lining up behind the safety car. But there's no way you could have let the race carry on with all of that debris on the road. So it's absolutely the right thing to do. Big drama here at Oulton Park in round 2 of British GT. We have a safety car. You can see the reason why. 2 cars off, bodywork all over the road. Richard Neary's Mercedes is the one on the left as you look, and that heap of metal on the right was a Bentley. It was Ian Loggie's car, and they tangled coming over hilltop. The safety car was eventually scrambled. It has got the leader behind it, and there's one back marker between John Minshaw and Derek Johnson, so it has brought the lead gap right down. And let's have a look at how the incident happened. Coming over hilltop, have a look at the top of the shot. There, the 2 get together and off at very high speed into the tyres, bouncing back across the road goes the Mercedes, and Ian Loggie's Bentley thankfully drives off the road. Richard Neary tries to get out of the way, but as he does so, cars completely unsighted scatter, and 63 Ginetta rotates Sam Webster at the wheel. Big scary moment for him, and then with the road blocked, there it is from another angle. Quite how they got together, it was harder to see, but that's a very big impact.
Well, you can see that the Bentley was on the inside. They've just come out of the chicane, so he's taken a tight line up the hill, and the Mercedes, well, side by side, and 2 going into 1. Ian Loggie, obviously livid, doesn't feel it was his fault. I think he probably thought the Mercedes moved across on the Bentley. The end result, though, is both cars are out. I think the 63 Ginetta has finally got off the grass, but I mean, poor Sam Webster must have gone around about 8 times before it stopped spinning. And then he was spinning the wheels just trying to get it off that steep hill off the grass. So the end result is we've closed the field right up. John Minshaw still leads in the Lamborghini. Derek Johnson still in 2nd place in the Aston Martin, but there is that one GT4 car between them, and that'll allow John Minshaw to get a jump. And David, the interesting factor here is that you've got the car number 1, the reigning champions from last year, behind the car that lost out in the final race. The Barwell Lamborghini nearly won the championship last year. They've won race 1, could well go on to win race 2, so they are coming from being the 2nd car in last year's championship to lead after race 1, and will likely lead after race 2 as well.
Well, it's building up, isn't it, for a very tight finish, this. We've got 12 and a half minutes just over before the checkered flag comes out. All of these laps, of course, count within the hour. So the clock on the screen counting down. We are behind the safety car. You know the format. You can't overtake. You have to carry on in formation. And the reason for the safety car is so that the race can carry on, albeit under controlled conditions. Now, also, while that accident was happening, there was a whole raft of team managers being summoned to race control. One of them was from Team Parker for Ian Loggie's car that's irrelevant now because it's out of the race, but the most significant of the numbers on the screen that we are having shown to us is that number 1 is Derek Johnston's Aston Martin's team manager and 33 for John Minshaw. So the top 2 cars, both the team managers are being summoned to race control, and this could be for pit stop infringements.
More likely than anything else because they haven't had incidents with anybody, so that seems likely. So John Minshaw, Derek Johnson, their cars might possibly have to serve penalties. Mark Farmer lies third ahead of Duncan Cameron and Rick Parfitt. That might be your podium.
Well, it could well be. And Duncan Cameron versus Mark Farmer, there are 0.6 of a second between. It's building up.
But before the safety car, they could have given the leader a 30-second penalty. He might only have lost 3 or 4 positions. Now you give him a 30-second penalty in lieu of a drive-through, he'll be 14th or 20th. So suddenly, because everybody's in his tight little bunch, then those penalties will have a much bigger effect.
And another part of the effect, and we're speculating that they are penalties here, but bear with me.
Well, they haven't brought them in to get Easter eggs.
No, true enough, but I mean, that assumes that that's why the team managers are being summoned to race control. But let's say there are some penalties going. Once you've served them, you've got fewer racing laps in which to do this, because we're coming to the last 10 minutes of the race. So if you lose 10 seconds in the pits, you have less time to make it up again.
I've got to say that with the safety car still out and clear up still going on, I would assume that any penalties will be retrospectively applied after the checkered flag, because first of all you've got a team to talk to team managers, and then secondly you've got to apply the penalties and inform the teams, by which time we're out of time.
Yeah, true.
So I would think that the order on the road might change. Now we are also wondering what happened to the number 100 McLaren, which came in very early. The team manager of car number 100 has been asking me. Remember, one of the cars in the first race was short. In GT4, you have to spend 100 seconds in the pits from the moment you break the speed limit being coming in to the moment you break the speed limit being going out. And in between time, obviously, you can't exceed the speed limit in the pit lane, and you've got to do your driver change. 100 seconds. One of the teams came out 18 seconds early, fully 20%, not fully 20%, but nearly 20% short or faster than they should have. I mean, that's not a quick thumb on the stopwatch. That's a major, major error. But the number 100 McLaren had problems right from the beginning, got a very early pit stop, and then now has bounced right to the top of the GT4 leaderboard, and they're being summoned to the pit lane as well. We'll take a look again at this incident. You can see that the Bentley was on the inside as the drivers come up the hill on driver's left. Looked like the Mercedes was coming across the line. So the Mercedes was in front, I think, of the Bentley at that stage on the road, and the Bentley was catching, and so it looks as though either the Mercedes didn't realise that Ian Loggie was making the move, or did realise that Loggie was making the move and tried to shut the door a little too much.
Can I offer you another horrible thought in all of this?
Yes.
Which is, looking at that, we keep looking at damaged cars, but that tyre barrier took an enormous whack.
Yeah.
And it's not just a case of clearing cars. I'm fearful that the tyre barrier ain't going to be repaired in 8.5 minutes to go racing.
No, I agree with you on that. I mean, we were late with the morning warm-up. Morning warm-up was truncated because of an off from a small Volkswagen earlier. Well, let's take a look, if we can, at where the cars were coming out of that previous chicane, because that'll give us a really good indication of who was where and who had, you know, momentum going up the hill. It does look as though I think that Bentley really, certainly from Ian Loggie's body language, caught the Mercedes by surprise. So the previous corner is the left-right left chicane. Down into the chicane they come.
It's a big gap there, isn't it?
So he goes off on the grass. That's the only way the Bentley could have made up those 2 or 3 car lengths up the hill. The Mercedes has gone off on the grass, come back on, weaved out wide as the cars sort of snap sideways. Ian Loggie's gone for the gap, which is then closed at the top of the hill.
That's exactly what he said. Yes.
His hands were doing exactly the same that mine were. So the Mercedes has lost it. So Richard Neary's lost it. He's gone off to his left, been spat across onto the track and into the middle of the track on the right. Ian Loggie's gone up the inside because he had momentum.
I'm here.
And no wonder he's feeling aggrieved. Now, unfortunately, the onboard is in the other Bentley. Otherwise, boy, that would have been an elucidating piece of video. But he got spat off by the grass back into the middle of the road. Unfortunately, Richard Neary, and so a lot of damage to Bentley, and actually probably a fair amount. Although we saw the undamaged side of the Mercedes, I think the other side doesn't really bear looking at, and I wouldn't want to be adding up the bill either.
It's one that you can't afford, I fear, like me.
I wouldn't even need to ask.
No. Ian Loggie, I'm afraid to say, has got a big bill there. Now, the other Bentley, the surviving car, 5th, but the fear is up here that the order now is the order at the end, because it's not looking as though we're going to be able to go racing just yet, and the clock's ticking down, as you can see, 6 minutes and change still to go. So it could be, but because of this safety car period, it kind of gives a get-out-of-jail-free card to John Minshaw and Phil Keane. Instead of it being a really close finish, it might be that we have to finish under the safety car. Hopefully not, but it could well be, and that sadly takes away the thought of a battle right down to the end, doesn't it? But the field now turning its way through Britain's. Now, Ian Loggie is by no means a happy driver. He is very much a rabbit of negative euphoria, but let's hear his side of the story. He's with Alex.
Yep, down here with a very, very frustrated Ian Loggie. Talk us through what happened.
I had been behind the green Mercedes. I think it was Richard Neary. It was driving the car for 2 or 3 laps, sitting right on him, and I was waiting for a time that he would make a mistake. So coming out of Britain's or Filston chicane, whatever it's called, he made that mistake. He got a big wobble on. I got up beside him, going up the hill. It was nearly his front wing, and he decided he would just come straight across me and take me out. So it took me out and it took him out as well. So there's a lot of damage to the car, but just it's poor, really poor. No need for it. I definitely had the run on him, and he knew I was beside him. It wasn't as if I was sitting in a blind spot or anything like that.
Glad you're okay.
End of the race.
Thank you.
So a very frustrated Ian Loggie, and the checkered flag is out. The race, as we were predicting, was going to have to end behind the safety car. It is not the way we wanted to end the race, but it's the only sensible way, I'm afraid, because they were never going to get the barriers repaired. The clock would continue to tick down, so the checkered flag is out early. It's 2 out of 2 for John Minshaw and Phil Keane. Martin, it's not, as I say, the way we were wanting the race to finish, but while they were racing, boy, did we have action.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the first time we've seen a safety car in a mixed weather conditions race day here at Oulton Park. So it is double victory for Phil Keane there, and his teammate John Minshaw this time gets to take the checkered flag, having watched Phil do it at the end of the first race. Derek Johnson, second position in the Aston Martin. Mark Farmer will finish in third ahead of Duncan Cameron, and Cameron will feel aggrieved that he didn't have that extra sort of 10 or 15 minutes to try and get back onto the podium again. Rick Parfitt in 5th position after all the Bentley's travails, the number 31 car, and in 6th position Jack Mitchell gets the first finish in GT3 for Macmillan Racing with the number 24 car. 7th is the car that started on the outside of the front row of the grid, and that is the number 30 car. So they didn't really have the greatest of opportunities to show what they've got. And then in 8th place is our GT4 winner on the road, and that is Sandy Mitchell, bringing the McLaren across the line. But Sandy Mitchell, along with the number 33 and number 1 car, team manager summoned to race control a short while ago, so we will wait to see what the long-term consequences of that are. And as you feared, David, damage to the tyre wall far more extensive than damage to the cars. The winner of GT4, we are now being told, is the 51 car. Wow, penalties have been applied because 51 is now 10th, 100 has now been dropped down to 14th position. So 51 is your GT leader, 8th overall. Marcus Hogarth second on the road, the number 29 car, and 501 in 3rd position. That's the Mike Robinson, Graham Johnson car, the reigning champions. There you can see all sorts of damaged cars. 111, we saw that early on Mike Simpson, Anna Valeska's car. It got to the end, so do they get points? I'm not sure they're far enough up the order, no. Only
There's points in the top 10, isn't it, in each class?
Yes, in each class, and there are now 3 or 4 classes in each category, GT3 and GT4, so yes, I think they will do. Anna Valeska 7th in her class. So, no changes have been applied to GT3, so let's take a look at the runners and riders. Your full classified pools check here on Bank Holiday Monday from the 3 p.m. and the British GT Race 2. John Minshaw, the winner at the line, double win for the Lamborghini. Derek Johnson, Mark Farmer for Aston Martin on the podium, ahead of Duncan Cameron, Rick Parfitt and Jack Mitchell. Then Ryan Ratcliffe in 7th position, the best of the Mercedes. Best Ginetta, Alex Reid in 8th. Best McLaren in 9th, Marcus Hogarth and Graham Johnson rounding out the top 10 as the GT4 winner. GT second in GT4, William Chiguta in 11th place, Dean McDonald, and on down through the GT4 category. And a couple of non-runners in the end. The most notable of whom was car number 6 of Sam Tordoff, had to pull off with an electrical issue. A misfire had dropped him down the order, and after Lamborghini 1-2 in race 1, he must have felt very keen to try and repeat that, and had an opportunity to, but in the end for Barwell, 4 cars started, 3 cars finished in the top 2. That's still not a bad Bank Holiday Monday day at the office.
And so John Minshaw steps out of the car, 2 out of 2, and that is a great way to open the account in British GT for 2017. It's a great shame that we've had the damage, but it was a good race while they were able to be green. The one consolation, and it's a tiny, tiny consolation for Ian Loggy as he stares at a huge bill, is that Callum McLeod did the fastest lap of the race, improving their potential for the rest of the season. Let's hear from our race winners. Let's go to Alex.
Well, winners once again, but not in quite the way that you wanted it. Bit of an upside-down race, that.
Very strange. I mean, I was hoping Keeney would give me enough to compensate for the sort of penalty, but gave me a little bit more, thankfully. But it was a shame for the race to end the way it did. That was quite nasty. It looked quite nasty. Such a lot of debris on the track now. They made the right decision.
You went from obviously taking the penalty, it looked like it was going to be an easy win. The safety car came out the first time, then it became a little bit more tricky, and then, like you say, the win again because of the second safety.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect it all to be on the podium today, just for the second race. So yeah, I'll take it. I'll take my 22nd penalty to Rockingham and see what we can do there.
Yeah, congratulations. Thanks. Nonetheless.
Well, fantastic weekend for the Barwell number 33 car. In fact, not exactly a bad weekend for the number 6 car. Yes, they'll go away remembering a disappointing retirement for race 1, but Liam Griffin and Sam Tordoff were second in race 1, rather retired in race 2, second in race 1. But the number 33 car, that has taken a commanding lead in the championship for John Minshaw and Phil Keane, last year's championship runners-up.
Whereas Derek Johnson and Johnny Adam get a 3rd and a 2nd and will have less pit stop penalty time when they get to Rockingham. So it pans out.
Well, here's the incident. There is Richard Neary in the Mercedes, and behind him the Bentley of Ian Loggy. They came together at the top of the hill with very damaging consequences. Bits of car flew off. That's what they're designed to do. Bits of tyre barriers are designed to fly off as well when they get the impact, and it was really the debris in the track that was in danger of puncturing all the car's tyres, and repairs to those barriers that were going to run us out of time. That was with about 13 or 14 minutes of the race still remaining, and you saw the tyre wall getting ripped asunder there, and that's really the big safety issue for everybody else.
Credit to both drivers for getting off the road. Ian Loggy was able to get off the track as soon as he could, and Richard Neary, who was obviously sitting at 90 degrees to the road and could see them all coming, as soon as the road was clear, limped out of the way.
Yeah.
So credit to both of them for having the presence of mind to do that after what was a very big impact indeed. Whoa. So 2 out of 2 for Lamborghini. Don't go anywhere, because there are still plenty of other aspects of Oulton Park to enjoy, and the mini challenge will be coming up onto the circuit next, but we'll also have a chance to hear from more of the GT drivers as well as they head towards the podium. But before all of that, let's have a look at the best bits of round 2 of the British GT Championship. From the rolling start, it was Phil Keane who led the way. The 2 Bentleys of Team Parker Racing running side by side as they ran through Old Hall Corner. Matt Griffin on his toes in the Ferrari, as lower down GT4 drivers got themselves together and badly delayed at the start of the race with the 100 McLaren. Then Seb Morris tagged Callum McLeod into a spin. He gained track position but would have to serve a drive-through penalty. It was all action in GT4, and then there was drama. Mike Simpson's Ginetta getting a whack from Scott Mulvin, who had a big ride in the Porsche Cayman off the road. Simpson was spinning as well, and more McLaren bodywork went flying. Then further drama at Bentley. It was Callum McLeod this time. He was rally crossing his way off at Cascades and almost ended up at Foster's as he biffed the barriers. Teammate Seb Morris wasn't out of the woods either. He had a big spin at Knickerbrook. He was able to rejoin, albeit with time lost, and there's also an investigation hanging over him for contact with James Littlejohn's Aston Martin. Through it all, though, Phil Keane headed for the pit window as Derek Johnston took over from Johnny Adam in the 3rd place Aston Martin. People lasted back into the race and gained second when Mark Farmer went all agricultural, coming out of Britain's. And then, just as we thought the lead gap was coming down, there was this big accident for Richard Neary and Ian Loggy at Hilltop. And with damaged cars off the road and debris all across the circuit, there was no option but to bring out the safety car, and there was no way, sadly, the track could be cleared in time. Ian Loggy had a good explanation of what happened. He'd seen it and felt it firsthand, and so it was a finish behind the safety car. We've got David Pittard and Alex Reid, the GT4 winners. They are on the top step of the podium at the end of round 2 of the championship, joined by the crew from McLaren, Marcus Hogarth and Matty Graham. Second and third in GT4, Graham Johnson and Mike Robinson. Benjamin Franasevici just handing over the trophies, the championship manager from SRO, the championship organisers, and David Pittard, the taller just of the 2 winners. Another underrated driver, Alex Reid, somebody else making a name for himself in GT4, deserving winners, and GT4 has given, yet again, Martin, bags of action.
Alex Reid loving that trophy. The chocolate egg might not survive, but the trophy definitely will.
Hey, champagne and chocolate, what more could you ask for?
Oh, one for the ladies there. Well, roses, you know. Absolutely. Well deserved. Matty Graham, that deal that came together so late for him to get into that McLaren, ends up on the podium here in Oulton Park for the 2nd year in a row. So 2nd race of the championship, and he's on the 2nd step of the podium. That McLaren deal looks like it might be a very sweet one. McLaren into racing, Richard Martin, Gareth Howell, and then Marcus Hogarth and Matty Graham. Matty coming into the car last week and sharing with Marcus, who moves across from last year's Maserati effort.
And the
What a different car that is.
Well, absolutely, yes. Just thinking, you're talking about McLaren and Maserati, but it's Leeds' finest from Garforth, the Ginetta that comes through to win the class, although a few penalties did shepherd a different result in GT4. And there, that was a Mercedes you just saw, and it was pretty damaged, inevitably. The side we couldn't see did take a massive whack. Richard Neary's car. Martin Short at the start of the day was saying, it's not my favourite circuit, Oulton Park. It won't have gone up much in his estimation after today.
Not much, no damage limitation, but he was talking about, but that was sort of in terms of points rather than actually limiting the physical damage. So, yes, it won't be on his favourite list. Well, let's hear from our GT4 winners. It all came to them very late. They're with Alex Legui.
2 very, very happy gents here, winners of the uber competitive GT4. What a race.
Yeah, I mean, it all kicked off at the start line for me, really. 3 cars into one didn't quite go, and I luckily was on the inside to make up the positions and come out P2. I think Mike Simpson had a bit of damage, so he was a bit of a cork in the bottle, really, and I knew it was going to kick off Scott Mulvern was looking racy and sent it up the inside into Cascades after Martin Plowman got past and picked up those 2 positions. Unfortunately, the McLaren then dragged past us, and I knew that they had a pit stop penalty from race 1. The other driver in the Nissan wasn't as quick as Alex, so I knew I could just hold station and not take too many risks. So handed over to Alex, and he did the job and brought it home. So absolutely over the moon.
Not quite as long a race as you were hoping for, though.
No. It is a shame that the race ended early, and it is a real shame that the cars involved are quite personal to me. That is a real shame that happened. So hopefully the guys are okay, I'm sure they'll be fine. The cars are pretty safe.
A great start to what will hopefully be a very good year. Well done, boys.
Can't wait.
Well, good news for Alex Reid is that everybody walked away from the machinery undamaged. There are your race winners. Phil Keane giving John Minshaw, and everybody else is giving John Minshaw an early bath, or bath, as they probably say up here, I imagine. And,
you be careful, you're outnumbered up here.
Yeah, 1-on-1. But you're Northern, yes, you're right. TF Sports, Derek Johnson, Johnny Adam in 2nd position. TF Sports, Mark Farmer and John Barnes in 3rd spot. But Barwell with 2 race wins with the number 33 Lamborghini.
And if you have a look down, it's not just trophies and champagne. There is the Blancpain clock as well that goes to the winning AM. And John Minshaw is that man. So John Minshaw it is who takes the win with Phil Keane. What does this do to the championship? Well, it means that Minshaw and Keane have 50 points against the 33 of Johnston and Adam with the 2 wins. John Barnes and Mark Farmer next on 25, ahead of Rick Parfitt and Seb Morris on 22. 2 up on Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin. So they go to Rockingham with a healthy points advantage. In GT4, it's a lot tighter. 2 points between Alex Reid, David Pittard and Adam Ballon, Adam Mackay. 3 back, Stuart Middleton and Will Tregerfa. And they're tied with Graham Johnson and Mike Robinson, last year's champions. So GT4, as we've been saying all day long, is the class that keeps on giving.
It always is, and it's a very, very competitive class, and you will see different race winners pretty much in every race, unless the McLaren has managed to steal a march on their rivals. But the way that the championship works is if you do get too clever and a bit too far ahead, then they will pull you back in and give everybody else a little bit of a break. So fascinating GT season openers here in Oulton Park. Lamborghini will go away feeling very happy indeed with a comfortable points lead. But the action is far from over. Stay with us on Front Runner. Much more to come.